Hello, everyone. I would like for us to start with a bit of a blast from the past. I think we all remember raising our hands in elementary school, so we're going to do a bit of activity here today, okay? Let's break the ice a little first. Raise your hand if you like ice cream. Okay, you can lower your hands. Raise your hand if you like hot chocolate. Yeah, me too. All right. Okay, raise your hand if you like learning. Lots of hands once again. That's good to see at a university, I have to say. And raise your hand if you like hearing good news. Me too. Okay, and lastly, raise your hand if you like listening to bad news. That's true. I don't have my hands raised either. My talk today will be about EDI, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how it fits into education. Taking a moment to reflect, I want you to think about what does equity, diversity, and inclusion mean to you right now? Before I started university, these three letters, EDI, didn't mean anything to me. But now I find that equity, diversity, and inclusion are important wherever I go, especially because it's always an opportunity to learn. I'd like to tell a story about EDI that relates to my personal experience as a student here at the University of Alberta. And then I'll tell you some bad news. But let's think of it like a full body stretch, okay? It's going to be uncomfortable in the moment, but good for us to know in the long run. So I am a bilingual nursing student, but I've noticed that when I tell people or introduce myself as a bilingual nursing student, lots of people assume that I study in Chinese and English. And initially that was quite shocking because I didn't realize that people would make assumptions based on my appearance. But as I progressed through university, I realized over half the people I talked to would make this assumption. In reality, I study in French and English, and it's a harmless correction. I just tell people and we laugh it off, or they feel a little bit embarrassed, but it's okay. It's easy to correct others in this scenario. But it's not always easy to correct others. When we jump to conclusions or make assumptions, we can manifest serious discriminatory consequences. And this brings me to heartbreaking racism that I've seen in the news and I've heard about from my friends. I've been told in clinical settings, after I was asked, oh, where were you born? And I mentioned I was born in China. People ask me, well, why don't you go back where you came from? That's highly inappropriate. And racism isn't the only ism. There's also sexism. 47% of students at post-secondary institutions in Canada have either seen or been on the receiving end of discrimination based on their gender identity, or sexual orientation. And it's not limited to universities either, and it's very sad. A report from the University of British Columbia, as well as the Angus Reid Institute, they analyzed what high school students' perceptions of diversity were, and they found that over half, 58% of students said that they witnessed other children being mistreated or bullied due to their race or ethnicity. So this is happening in schools and in universities. Racism, sexism, discrimination of all sorts can be traced back to systems. And it is a huge problem. How? Why? For me, especially as a health science student, it's most evident in the health of individuals, specifically in health inequities that can manifest. Our government of Canada states that when minority groups are being harassed or they experience discrimination, it can lead to stress and trauma, which has negative impacts on people's mental and physical health. The government also states that there are determinants of health, things that determine your health, and these are not things that are immediately obvious. For example, your income, and also your cultural or racial background. It was really surprising for me to learn that who you are can determine your health. And to me, when someone's health is negatively implicated or impacted based on who they are, that's not acceptable at all. Has anyone heard of the determinants of health before today? Show of hands. A few people. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to have learned about these topics as a nursing student here at the University of Alberta. And I want to touch a little bit more on education. Speaking of education, I want everyone to reflect on what that word means to you. When I say education, what do you think of? For me, I used to think of rows of desks, maybe some final examinations, school backpacks, that sort of idea. But I'd like to propose a redefinition of education. Rather than school systems, consider the education that happens in our daily lives. Let's say you're going to get your morning coffee in the morning, and you realize the coffee prices have gone up. Boom. You learn something new every day, right? The coffee prices have changed. Or let's say you're scrolling through social media and you find out a fun fact. You learn something new. Or let's say you're talking to a friend and you tell them a joke and they don't laugh. So now you learn that joke is not as funny as you thought. So you do learn something new every day. It's true. We interact with others and we learn from each other on a daily, normalized basis, but we might not be conscious of this as education because it doesn't fit with our image of what we think of when we think of the word education. So how does this all relate to EDI? Let's reframe EDI in this newfound appreciation of education. We hear that education is the path to the future, so let's take it a step further and use education as a tool to incorporate greater diversity and inclusion. I'm definitely no expert at all, but in my personal experiences as a volunteer on campus, I've framed it or tried to frame it in 3 action objectives, and they all happen to start with L. But these are not the kind of L's that will relate to losing, okay? This will make us winners. So these 3 L's are ones that you can implement in your day-to-day interactions, or should I say, your educational moments with others. They are lens, listening, and love. So I have a bit of an activity for everyone to do. I would love for everyone to find someone around you that you haven't spoken to or you don't know that well, and identify 3 similarities between yourselves and 3 differences. And after 1 or 2 minutes, we'll come back together and we'll talk about it.